Okay, guys, so today I wanted to talk about Phil Spencer's legacy. I'm here with Miss Freya. She's all schnozzed up. She's been outside playing with Romeo, and he drools on her and makes like the top of her head all gnarly. So we've got to give her a little wipe bath here after we film this. But I wanted to talk about Phil Spencer's legacy because we are now kind of seeing behind the curtain a lot with Xbox, and a lot of fingers are being pointed back at that previous leadership team, and a lot of questions are being raised about it. So I figured we could kind of go back, look back through rose-tinted glasses at simpler times and simpler days, because Phil, I think, is one of the most influential leaders in gaming history, certainly in the last like 15 years, for better or worse. And I think it's fascinating to see how he was able to maintain a relatively positive image throughout his tenure. And then the moment he departed, we see behind the curtain and it's revealed that no, things were bad. Like things were really, really bad. So let's talk about it. First things first, when Phil Spencer took over, I think it's important to understand where Xbox was. It was a really weird time. They just launched the Xbox One. It had gone poorly, to put it mildly. The previous guy was a guy named Don Mattrick. He famously told people if they didn't like the always online connectivity or the fact that you had to buy a Kinect with your Xbox One, that you should just buy a 360. Ballsy answers. And fascinatingly enough, Don Mattrick would leave Xbox pretty much at the outset to go work as CEO of a mobile game company. I believe it was Zynga. And he just took off. Like he was like, okay, I screwed this up. Peace, and then left. Ballsy again. And then Phil Spencer took over. And Phil Spencer, interestingly enough, it was just revealed that he was very close friends with Bobby Kotick. There was an interview we looked at on stream recently. Trevor clipped it for the Luke Stevens Clips channel, which you should also be subscribed to. Bobby Kotick revealed, and he was the CEO and head of Activision that sold and managed that whole sale to Xbox. He revealed that he was very close with Phil Spencer and that Phil was actually in the running and probably going to be his replacement at Activision. So if Phil Spencer hadn't taken over as CEO of Xbox, he probably right now would have been CEO of Activision in charge of Call of Duty and everything, which is fascinating to just think of that different timeline. Like if they didn't sell to Xbox and Phil wasn't in charge, Phil Spencer would be in charge of Call of Duty, Blizzard, King and Candy Crush and everything. Maybe he would have tried to sell it to Xbox or something. We don't really know, but that's what the timeline would have looked like. It's also why they were able to acquire Activision, because Phil was very close with Bobby Kotick, which is something we didn't know until Bobby said that in an interview a few weeks ago. But Phil had a long history at Xbox. He was on stage during like the Kinect reveal. He had been there a long time. And I think Phil, to his credit, was a gamer through and through. Sorry, she's just flopping around on the floor. She wants belly rubs, which I will happily give you, but you gotta chill. But basically, he was a gamer through and through. He made his gamer profile public, for example. People could track and see how many hours he was spending gaming a week. He was very open and transparent about it, which is impressive, you know? When he came in to take over Xbox, he took a few years to kind of get his feet under him. It was very clear the Xbox One generation was not going well, and that PS4 was just dominating. And the main reason it was dominating was because of big tentpole exclusives that carried the generation. I mean, truly. You think of how many big tentpole releases from PlayStation came out that either rebooted famous IP like God of War, or that like elevated IP or created new IP entirely, whether it's like Ghost of Tsushima or it's things like The Last of Us getting the remaster leading into the sequel, Uncharted getting a proper send-off also from Naughty Dog, or even, you know, one-off games like Bloodborne. Some of those games really, really defined the generation. And Xbox just didn't really have much. They were caught between this like live service push from the Don Mattrick days, when he greenlit all this stuff circa 2011, 2012, 2013. His vision for the Xbox One was that it was going to basically be a mini Wii, and that it was all going to be about motion controls, and it was all going to be about gaming, but not really. Like his vision for the Xbox One was that it was going to be the ultimate cable box, which I believe is an exact quote, which is amazing. You know, you think about the vision, like being a leader with vision, And you just think of somebody thinking like, what is gaming gonna be in say 2020? It's like, well, you're gonna want to have the ultimate cable box. Like, talk about missing the mark, not even being close to reality. It's like you're gonna want something that handles your cable subscription really well. It's like unbelievable. But I think that was part of it, is that because of those pushes, Fable, for example, was horribly mistreated. Fable was initially given the opportunity to be turned into a Kinect game that was abysmal, utterly atrocious. I'll have Jacob put up footage of it here. It's one of the most terribly reviewed games in Xbox's library. It was horrible. It was horrible. And then after that, they greenlit a sort of live service multiplayer game in Fable called Fable Legends, and that never saw the light of day. They showed it a few times, and it was also a disaster. And then they also managed to just systematically mismanage things like Halo. They mismanaged Gears, like across the board. You try to find one IP that Xbox had, try to find one that they didn't screw up or mistreat during that period, and you honestly can't find it. And I think that was the first little red flag for Phil Spencer's managerial approach, which was that he was a true fan of games, but that also meant that he seemingly did not like to tell people, specifically game designers, what to do or what not to do. He very much trusted them to do what they wanted. And that led to a broader company-wide approach of being hands-off, which sounds great, but it's not that simple. So, for example, when they bought out ZeniMax, and Bethesda Softworks, and as part of that, they got access to Arcane. When they bought out Arcane, they got, of course, Arcane Lyon, who are doing the Blade game and had done Dishonored and all that. And then they also bought out Arcane Austin, which had done Prey, and they were working on an upcoming game that was all about vampires and sounded really mysterious and crazy. And coming off of Prey, you'd be like, oh, they know what they're doing, right? So Phil did not want to step in and intervene. He didn't want to be the guy that bought out this company and then comes in and says, no, stop that. You do this instead. He didn't want to do that. So he stayed hands off. Problem is, they were working on Redfall. And reportedly, I believe it was Jason Schreier reported on it, that they, at the studio, wanted him to come in and cancel the game because the only reason they were making it was to make their portfolio, ZeniMax's portfolio, look more valuable. Because they could say, we're working on this live service game that's projected to make $500 million in its lifetime. So that's a $500 million game. Money, please. Like, that's what they were doing. That's why Bethesda launched Fallout 76 in such haste back in 2018. In that, like, 2018, 19, 2020 period, all of these companies started pumping out live service to boost those figures because they were hearing rumblings and entering negotiations for buyouts. To be clear, it wasn't just Xbox. There was another entity that was interested in buying out ZeniMax at the time that Xbox would eventually outbid, but there were other companies that they were talking to, so it wasn't just like they were trying to sell to Xbox. They were shopping around for sure. I do want to give Phil credit that, again, on paper, that sounds great. Being hands-off as an executive sounds great. How many times have we talked about out-of-touch executives that come in and don't know what they're doing, get involved and ruin a project, right? Because they don't know what they're talking about, but they start telling people what to do and what not to do. A great example of a manager that has this approach and it seems to work out is Strauss Zelnick. Strauss did an interview talking about how he's managed Rockstar and how he's empowered those types of studios to make masterpieces consistently without like spoiling the creative pursuit of all that. And he said very simply, my job is to acquire, retain, and empower the world's best talent and then get out of their way. Which is like, snaps, everybody. You know, like, that sounds awesome. But there is one very important part that's like an asterisk to that point, which is that you get out of their way if they know what they're doing and if they're working on something that makes sense, right? Like, you get out of their way at that point. But sometimes guidance and supervision is important, okay? And I think that that's sort of an unspoken part of what Strauss was saying, but it's needing to be said in the case of Xbox, because what Phil wanted to do was just be totally hands-off. But I don't think that that's necessarily what like Strauss is doing. I think Strauss, if Rockstar executives came to him and said, hey, we know you want GTA 6 next. And they come to him like 2019 and say this. We know you want GTA 6 next. But what if table tennis? We're really into it at the office. We love ping pong. what if we just made a super hardcore table tennis game? Phil probably would have been like, I'm not saying nothing. Do whatever you want to. I think Strauss would be like, go work on GTA 6. I'll stay out of your way. You know how to make that game and make it good. But no, within reason. Like, he would supervise and occasionally step in to nudge him back on the right course for the sake of the business. But, in the minutia, he would stay out of the way, which I think is the problem, is that Phil was out of the way both in the like big picture and then the little picture as well. But the big picture, he needed to be involved, which is why it's all the more insane. And it starts to explain why you could have like a big Fallout TV show and no Fallout games to pair with it, right? Not even a remaster or a remake or anything. Or even re-releases, like nothing like that. They had Fallout Anniversary Edition, which broke the game. But it's because, I think, as a fan, Phil didn't want to tell Todd what to do. Because he's looking at Todd and is like, kind of a fan himself. So he doesn't want to step in and do that. It would be like if you were the world's biggest Beatles fan, and then you get hired as an executive at a record label, and then you've got to go tell Paul McCartney what kind of album he should put out. Like, you'd be like, I'm not telling him what to do. Do you know who that is? That's Paul freaking McCartney. But sometimes you need somebody who's kind of on the outside who can just be like, Todd, what do you mean you're taking 20 years between Fallout games? Get your ass moving. Like, what? You need somebody like that sometimes. And I think that was one of the problems that started to really rear its ugly head in the late 2010s, going into the next gen launch, which is when all these projects were starting to get greenlit. Interestingly enough, also, there's leaked emails, not really leaked, they were released as part of the FTC hearings for the Activision acquisition, but there were email chains and threads released during that time where we can see emails Phil Spencer sent to Matt Booty and sent to, what's his name, Pete Hines, the head of global marketing for Bethesda, and we can see what he was saying circa 2020, 2021. And we can see emails where he's telling his team, guys, what is going on? We just put out this game and it flopped catastrophically because it was like a buggy mess and wasn't ready. You guys told me this game was going to be ready fall of this year. It's not. It needs another year and a half. What is going on? And he basically was blowing everybody up for misleading him on this stuff, which I think was a broader issue, which was that things were very, very loosey-goosey at Game Pass for a long time. And I think that kind of pairs itself with the ultimate legacy of Phil Spencer, which of course is Game Pass. It seems like at a certain point, the vision became clear. Game Pass is going to be the Netflix of gaming. Who wouldn't love that? Netflix prints money. Netflix is huge. Netflix by itself is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. That's amazing. If we can just do that for gaming, we're good, right? And I think that was the intention from the start. But the thing is, like, it's really hard to do Netflix. It's not easy. And it's like Netflix, at least, they're pumping out a season of a TV show, right? With 6 episodes that takes them 3 years to make, right? Or in the context of maybe the broader portfolio, they're also putting up, back in that era, they were putting up like The Office. They bought the rights to The Office from NBC because they didn't have their own streaming service yet. They put The Office up, which has already been produced, and it's just part of their library, right? But a lot of people are subscribing just for that show, in addition to like Breaking Bad or whatever else. And so they were able to build out the library to get users in and lock them up. Gaming's different. Like gaming, you're talking about a team taking 5 years to make something that people will get through in a weekend or even a week or two, and then they're probably not playing it again for a couple of years. Like that's hard. That's hard to make that work. Especially the economies of scale there are rough. And that's what they ultimately found out. But it worked so long as there was Papa Warbucks writing blank checks to pay for everything, which is what seemingly was happening, is that Satya Nadella was just writing blank checks from Microsoft and letting that pay and subsidize Xbox. And that works until he says no more, right? Like I think Game Pass was not truly profitable, potentially ever. And when we say profitable, we mean making more money and keeping money at the end of all of the expenses being removed, right? They were bringing in a lot of money, sure, but they were spending a lot too. Like a lot. And that's an important thing to remember with all of these subscription models, is that there's a lot of money being spent to build out these portfolios. And you just can't forget that. Like we look at it and we say, oh, they have 30 million subs. That's great. 30 million subs, and they have how many tens of thousands of employees across the world? Like, how many millions are they spending on promotion? A report just from the other day suggested that even after all these recent price hikes, that the Xbox Series X and S are still losing Microsoft about $100 to $150 per unit. Even at $800 for like the top tier Xbox Series X, that's still losing them like $150. What? That's crazy. But that's done because you have to pay to acquire customers, right? And I think that was the idea from Phil for a long time, was that we're losing money now, we're being very aggressive, we're buying up studios, we're building out that Netflix portfolio, right? So people have a reason to subscribe and stay subscribed, and it will eventually be profitable. And they estimated profitability based on projections and ideas of continued growth and all that. However, they did not meet those expectations. The expected current subscriber base for Game Pass in 2026, by the end of this year, Xbox expected, according to official documents released during the Activision hearings, they expected to have 77 million subscribers right now. They have 30, which is less than they had like a year ago because a bunch of people unsubscribed. That's rough. That's rough. It starts to make sense why maybe Phil is not in charge anymore. And I think all of it's just kind of compounded. This philosophy of trying to turn Game Pass into a subscription model that would just create recurrent revenue and pay the bills indefinitely. That works if you can grow it to 77 million subs and keep those subs and they don't leave. The moment that is called into question, it doesn't work. And I think once growth started to slow in the last 3 to 4 years, they started to go full panic mode. And I'm guessing behind the scenes, there were calls from Satya, angry calls, where he's like, why the hell has growth slowed? Why are we not adding new members? This doesn't work. The $70 billion payday that we just sent out, like that doesn't work unless we're growing. Why are we not growing? And so Phil and Sarah started to panic, and they started trying to come up with any possible way to grow the tent, which is why they had the brilliant idea of turning everything into an Xbox. You need an Xbox, quote unquote, to have a Game Pass subscription. People aren't buying the console because we don't have like exclusive content to drive people to the console. So what if we just turn your phone into an Xbox? And then you get Game Pass there. Like that was the idea. That's as shallow as that sounds. That really was the concept. And it obviously didn't work. I mean, people mocked it and derided it. It seems to have been an utter disaster. But that's what they wanted to do. That's what they tried to do. And it didn't work. And so I think ultimately, the lasting legacy of Phil is going to be a lot of the untangling of the mess that he left behind. But I think, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. He had solid ideas. He had things that he wanted to do. And I think ultimately the utopian idea of Game Pass was beautiful. The idea that you pay $10 a month and you have access to thousands of games. That's really cool. The problem is that it literally sounds too good to be true because it's too good to be true. I mean, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And ultimately, one of the interesting wrinkles to all of this, when we talk about legacy, one of the interesting wrinkles to it is whether Game Pass will ultimately have a good legacy. Looking back on it 10 years from now, what do people say about Game Pass at that point? I think right now it's really easy to be like, maybe take it for granted. I think there's a strong chance that in 5 years, Game Pass, if it still exists, will look very, very different. It'll be like a portfolio or a collection of older Xbox games that released during the Series X and S generation, but it doesn't have any current gen games, or it's just like a backwards compatibility subscription, basically. I think that's probably where it ends up, because one thing that's been echoed from many developers, this is something that Jason Schreier was even reporting on recently. I believe he said he spoke to some senior people at one of these big studios within Microsoft, and those senior developers felt that Game Pass devalued their games. Because effectively what it does is it creates this feeling of like hand waving away a game to just be like, well, it's on Game Pass. I'll get to it when I get to it. Or if people are like considering buying your game, they go, I don't know, it's on Game Pass. I'm not going to buy it right now. I'll just play it eventually, and I'll get a Game Pass subscription eventually. Like, it gives a reason not to buy it with real money for like full price. Because effectively what Game Pass turns into is a deep sale simulator. And I've seen people do this. I've done it myself. You know, I'm sure you have too, where you go and you're like, I'll play it on Game Pass eventually. You know, like it's not great.
You're just sneezing up a storm. What's wrong? You good? You good?
She got the sneezes, my goodness. Did you inhale a spider? Maybe that's what happened. And I think that that's probably a fair feeling to have, frankly. I think it's fair because I know that if I'm looking at a game and I'm like, ooh, it's $70. I don't think it looks $70. I'll wait for a deep sale or for it to go to Game Pass. Like it puts games in that bucket of like discount rack, you know, which is not something you want people thinking when they think of your premium experience, right? And I think that's happened more broadly for a lot of their biggest IP, is that it just turns those games into like bargain bin feeling games, unfortunately. Even when they are not bargain bin games, they get treated that way. And I think part of the reason they get treated like bargain bin games is because of how Microsoft has approached marketing these things, because already the margins are stupid tight. And so they don't want to spend a lot of money or effort to make games a moment, you know? That's what you need. You need like the new Gears to be a moment. Like how everybody's anticipating the launch of GTA 6. That's going to be a moment. Everybody's anticipating the launch of, you know, the next Larian game, Divinity. Everybody's anticipating the launch of Elder Scrolls 6. Everybody's anticipating the launch of Wolverine, you know, those big beats. You need that for all of your first party games, but Microsoft just started treating them as like, well, this week on Game Pass, we have Doom the Dark Ages, and next week we have this, and then we have this in a month, and it just started treating games like they were just the next meal on the conveyor belt coming through, you know? That doesn't work. It doesn't really work, clearly, because it removes a level of excitement and joy that people have, and it doesn't actually build a premium experience, you know? And I think that ultimately with Phil, and this was not necessarily his fault, I think this was beyond his control. He was too early. He was too early. I think Phil was too early with Game Pass. I think if they had launched Game Pass right now and like the Series S right now, it would be like a godsend. It'd be like, oh my God, the savior of gaming just came on high, came from on high with like discounted consoles and hardware and stuff. This is amazing, right? At least I think that's the reaction people would have had. But because of when it came out, it positioned Xbox as a value console, as like, if you can't afford the premium experience, get the Series S. You know, that's what it became. And that's what the marketing slogan was, the best value in gaming. Game Pass, the best value in gaming, which it was. And there's an argument to be made that it still is, right? The problem is it becomes debatable once your console goes up to like $800. It becomes debatable when you start having to remove games from day one and start doing like early access for $35 extra and deluxe editions to try and get people to play early so that they spend a little bit more money. That's when it stops feeling like it's the best value in gaming, and it starts to feel like this is just a more convoluted way to get a game. Like for me and my friends, we were just talking about this the other night. We are not buying like, well, I say we. I buy and play a lot of games for what I do. But we collectively, they are not buying a new game every week. They're not buying a new game every month. They're waiting for a game they're really excited about, and then they buy it. And some of those are occasionally Xbox games, like maybe the new Halo Campaign Evolved. That's one that they might want, and they're looking at it and they're like, "Ooh, yeah, that looks good." But like, am I gonna like I could get it through Game Pass for a month and then just cancel Game Pass? Like, why would I keep a Game Pass subscription year round? If there's one game every 4 months or every 6 months that I actually want through that service, I might as well just buy it and then I own it. Especially on like PC, a lot of gamers are just going to choose to buy it instead of like just renting it effectively, because PC gamers don't tend to tolerate that kind of thing very loosely at least. And I think that that's why it's all the more baffling that the console space was neglected so heavily by Phil and Sarah, or maybe just taken for granted. Like, I think they just struggled to sell Xbox Series consoles. And at some point, they just kind of gave up, which is why they pivoted to everything's an Xbox. If we can't sell you a console, everything's a console, right? And it did not work. It did not work. And the reason why that's baffling to me is because the attachment rates on Game Pass for people who bought an Xbox are ridiculously high. It's like 80% or something. Practically everybody who buys an Xbox console signs up for Game Pass and keeps it. Very few people on Xbox are buying individual games through the Xbox store. They're playing those games through Game Pass. So if you need to boost Game Pass numbers, your priority should be figuring out a way to get those consoles in people's hands and figuring out why people are not buying them and engaging with them and excited about them. To me, I think as a PC gamer, PC master race, I think console exclusivity and stuff is like kind of cringe, if I'm being real. Like, if I was the God Emperor of gaming, I would pound my mighty hammer down and demand that all games end up everywhere. But I understand it can't be like that. I understand it's not that simple. And frankly, for the sake of the broader industry, Sony left unabated, unchallenged is not good for the industry. They need competition to avoid being what they are right now. And I think that a healthy Xbox means likely a healthy PlayStation as well, and vice versa. And I think in order to have a healthy Xbox, you need a healthy console ecosystem. And frankly, I cannot think of another reason to buy an Xbox console unless there's exclusive content for it I can't get elsewhere. Because on PC, I'm just gonna play the game on PC if it's available there. You know, the reason why I have a PlayStation 5 is because there are games there I can't get elsewhere, and they're games that I want to play. Exclusivity kind of drives the narrative for a lot of purchasing decisions when it comes to consoles, and that's something that Xbox largely gave up on. Now, to a certain extent, they don't care if you're buying and playing Xbox games on PC versus the console, because it's Microsoft. They win either way. But when it comes to the players, of which there are many, who are choosing between PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S, they're just, I mean, why would you go with Series X when, like, most of those games are coming to PlayStation anyways? I mean, there literally is no reason, right? Unless you happen to like the controller more or something. Like, there's no reason. And I think that that is something that Asha is at least experimenting with backtracking on. Like, as a PC gamer, I'm going to get those games on PC regardless. So it's console exclusive. It won't go to PlayStation. Like, if it's console exclusive, like Clockwork Revolution, for example, that's just going to stick to Xbox and PC. So if you want to play it on a more open platform, you could get it through Steam or whatever. But I think that that could at least start to instill a little bit of a competitive edge. But I think the real maybe litmus test for how serious Asha and how aggressive she's going to be is whether or not she makes Elder Scrolls 6 console exclusive. They made Starfield exclusive, sure. Are we really going to pretend like that was as big of a deal as making Elder Scrolls exclusive, though? Like, I personally don't think making Starfield console exclusive moved the needle much. I mean, maybe there were some people that bought an Xbox just to play Starfield. I think more of them maybe bought a PC if they really wanted to play it, which is fine. Again, Microsoft, I don't think cares because you're still buying a Windows PC. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see if she's willing to go all in on exclusives and try to do that to build out the ecosystem. That's going to be fascinating. I think that'll be a full, speaking of Phil's legacy, which is the point of this video, I think that would be a full, like, closing of the book, closing of the chapter on Phil's legacy, as if they give up on the kind of publishing side, if they give up on everything everywhere all at once. I think that that would pretty clearly say that they are moving away from that. And here's the deal, like, as much as people liked Phil, and I think Phil was a nice guy, I think Phil is probably a cool guy, you'd want him at your barbecue as far as I can tell. But I mean, there's just at some point you got to acknowledge what they were doing was not working. Like, what they were doing was systematically and regularly imploding their own business. So at some point, as nice as he is, he was not the guy for the job. His vision, his ideas were well-intentioned, I think, but they were not working. They just weren't, okay? Like, and so when we look at his legacy, I think unfortunately the legacy is probably going to be as someone who meant well, but ran Xbox into the ground. Like Don Matrick knocked over the first domino for sure, and Phil, while trying to hold up the dominoes and stop them from collapsing, accidentally knocked over 1,000 more. Ultimately, yeah, you could point back to Don Matrick and say it all started with him and he's the one to blame, but I don't think, at the very least, I think we can say that Phil did not stop what was happening. Tried his best perhaps, but it did not stop. And so now as we look forward into the future, we ask what is next. I personally think it's going to be a steady dismantling of Phil's legacy. I think Game Pass is going to change in format significantly. I think day one Game Pass launches are going to be a thing of the past within a couple of years. I think Asha is going to probably lean into exclusivity to try and get people to buy into the ecosystem, because that's just what has to happen. And I think pretty much systematically they're going to go line by line and undo a lot of the stuff that Phil did over the last 15 years, which is probably, I mean, even if some of the things Phil did that I liked, at the very least, I think fair, yeah, it wasn't working. Try something else. Because ultimately, and again, this is my broader point with all of this, is just that a healthy industry has competition. When Xbox is half dead on the bottom of the stairs, it doesn't force Sony to be better. It allows them to get away with being horrible, because nobody is gonna take advantage of their mistakes, because nobody is even standing up. Nobody's even in the same range, And so I think the best thing for PlayStation gamers even is a healthy Xbox, is a healthy level of competition. Nintendo's doing fine, but Nintendo's Nintendo, they're going to do what they're going to do. They don't care either way. My wife is calling, so I'm going to take this. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. Much love. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.
He took my thing.